What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Warm Weather Fans, the Sunbelt podcast. I'm your host, Brian Stone, joined just this week by Matt Miguez. Zeke Palermo is currently under the weather, which he told us earlier today. But Matt, before I throw it over to you, I kind of want to do the plugs up top this week. Just want to remind everybody, we are now on YouTube. So go to youtube.com/@warmweatherfans. You will see video versions of all of our episodes up there. We are also on TikTok. I try to get at least 1 to 2 clips updated on that. And then obviously, our X account at Warm Weather Fans. Check us out there. And then if anybody ever has any questions or comments, wants to have a question read or answered by the members of the show, you can do so at warmweatherfans@gmail.com. But Matt, how's it going today?
Man, I'm doing well. Really fun weekend of college football. There's a lot to get to in the Sun Belt as we enter Week 8, which is just absolutely insane.
Yeah, it's a little sad that we're this far down the road as far as college football goes, but we're fully in the swing of conference play, and we got a lot of good games this last weekend to talk about, and then in the upcoming weekend as well. So let's go ahead and get started here. Not a great game to talk about, but Thursday night, James Madison faced off with Coastal Carolina. Frankly, I think it's time, and I think Tim Beck kind of came to this conclusion during the game as well. I think it's time that they give somebody else a shot at quarterback for Coastal Carolina. Ethan Vasco started this game off. I believe he was 3 of 4 for like 60 yards, and he ended the game 5 of 18, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, including a pick 6, and the Chanticleers lose 39-7 on the road against James Madison. This was just an ugly performance, and we've talked about over the past few weeks Vasco's ups and downs at quarterback, but this was pretty much the full encapsulation of that, where he throws a long touchdown. I think they either put him up 7-0 or tied at 7-7, and then he goes 2 of 13, 14 the rest of the game, which is just totally unacceptable at this level of football. So what do you think they should do with the quarterback spot moving forward?
Yeah, it was an interesting game, right? It's one of those where he starts off solid, and then had a couple bad drives, including that pick 6, and things just kind of snowballed away from him. Next thing you know, it was 29-7 at the halftime break, and that's hard to come back from, especially on the road. So not a great performance from Coastal. Really strong performance from James Madison, who's now 5-1. Look, if you're Coastal, I don't know. I don't know where you turn, because unless Tim Beck can openly admit that he made a poor decision, do you have a better quarterback on the roster?
Maybe not, but I don't know how much longer you can stomach this, like, one good game, one absolutely terrible game kind of pattern that Vasco's been on this season. So if it's Noah Kim or whoever else on the roster, that he just wants to have basically an open competition this week in practice and get them ready for next week with a new quarterback, like, I think that's the route you have to take, because Vasco, I think more than any other quarterback, has some of the, I don't want to say the highest highs, because I don't think he has like an Alonzo Barnett 7 touchdown performance in him, but he has some pretty good games under his belt. But it is so like up and down, hills and valleys, that I don't know how much longer you can kind of tolerate this.
No,
If you're actually trying to
agree with that.
So I think you have to kind of make a determination now. You're 4-1. You're 1-1 in the conference. Do you want to compete for the East, or do you just want to try to spend this year developing a quarterback? Because they got off to such a hot start that it feels like it would be a total waste to do, one of these things where we basically just take the season to kind of gauge what we have at the position, and then we figure it out in the off season and next year. But I don't know of a way that you can realistically compete when your quarterback can go what, 3 of 14 in, after the first quarter of play. Like, what do you do with that?
That's a really tough spot for Tim Beck to be in, a guy who's not very experienced as a head coach. It's only his second season. And look, not to knock Coastal, they are still 4-2. They've had a pretty solid start to the season, but I agree. Time might be running out for Ethan Vasco because that quarterback play is just not going to cut it.
Yeah, so maybe they look to the portal, or maybe they have a good recruit they feel good about coming in this year or something like that. But whether, like I said, whether it be Noah Kim or whoever else that's in that quarterback room besides Vasco, I think you just have to give somebody else a shot at starting a game and getting in the feel and the flow of the offense, and not just being jammed in there, cold down 22 or whatever, and Beck being like, hey, figure it out. Like, I don't know. So I will say Alonzo Barnett turned in another really good performance in this one. 16 of 28, 199 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. George Petway, 13 carries, 89 yards. JMU just dominated this game after the Vasco touchdown pass. I mean, there's truly no other way to put it. I mean, again, they had a pick 6. They picked Vasco off a second time before he got yanked. I'm kind of surprised he didn't get yanked earlier than he even did. To get to what 5 of 18 means there was probably a streak of 6 or 7 consecutive passes that he just whiffed on.
Correct.
So it's crazy that he got the amount of opportunity he did, to be quite frank. So yeah, it's going to be tough. Like Coastal Carolina, being honest, they have issues at the quarterback position, which we've detailed over the last couple minutes. But honestly, they don't really have a running game that you can kind of lean on the way that they did when Chadwell was there. Their defense is not really anything to be overly excited about. They have like 1 or 2 decent pieces, but that's 1 or 2 out of 11 guys, and that's just
right.
It's not basketball. Like, you can't just say, hey, we've got 2 really good players on defense, like that's gonna lift us to victory. It's like, that's not how football works. There's too many positions and moving parts for that. So James Madison with the victory is now 5-1 and 1-1 in the Sun Belt. Coastal Carolina drops to 4-2 and is now 1-1 in the Sun Belt, like Matt said. All right, so starting on Saturday's games, I think we found out, other than Southern Miss, Georgia State is the doormat of the conference. Georgia State is to Southern Miss is the Eastern equivalent of Southern Miss, where if you need a get right spot and you need to pick up a win and turn kind of the team's confidence around, you play Georgia State right back on cue. So Old Dominion beats them 21-14. We've talked about how Old Dominion, kind of is the team equivalent of Ethan Vasco, where it's all over the place. There's zero consistency. They looked fairly good in this one. Joseph, the quarterback, honestly led both teams in rushing with 98 yards. So he's got a bit of scrambling ability, gives them kind of another dimension. Christian Valaire, another terrible performance, to be quite frank, 22 of 40. So he's almost completing like barely over half of his attempts, 211 yards and a touchdown, and they just couldn't get anything going. We're a long way from Zeke saying Freddie Brock's going to shred Georgia Southern, and now we're deep in the Georgia State rabbit hole of, you guys might not win another game this year the way that this is looking.
Yeah, they've looked a little rough. Obviously, they're having some quarterback issues right now too, because the last touchdown pass that they got late in the fourth quarter wasn't even thrown by Valaire. Zach Gibson came in, and he was 6 of 6 for 49 yards and a touchdown. So there could be a competition on their hands. Look, I thought Freddie Brock had a decent game. Only got 12 carries, but he got 40 yards out of it. But yeah, the Colton Joseph really had a strong performance. He wasn't a great passer. 14 of 23, 141 yards, had a touchdown and a pick. But like you said, ran for 98 yards and really kept Georgia State defense honest. It wasn't a pretty game by either team, but Old Dominion made 1 or 2 more plays, and that ultimately ended up being the difference. But yeah, no, I agree with you. Georgia State's in a rough spot. I still think Old Dominion's in a pretty rough spot as well. Southern Miss, they're they're obviously down there. And I'm gonna give you a fourth team that might surprise some people. App State's down there in 2024.
Oh yeah,
They're down there. They're not good,
no,
which is crazy that I'm even saying that, because ever since they joined the conference in 2014, App State has been dominant. They're not good,
no.
and I'm not sure how you fix it. To be quite honest, everybody says fire Sean Clark, and yeah, I mean maybe, but is that going to fix it?
Well, let's table that discussion when we get to the Louisiana game, because I have a couple of thoughts on that game specifically and how it kind of shapes what App State should do from that perspective. But just talking about this game, you mentioned Zach Gibson. I remember when he was playing, I think it was under the previous head coach at Georgia Tech. It wasn't Brent Key. It was whoever the really terrible head coach was. His name is escaping me at the moment. But he was pretty rough for the Yellow Jackets because they were in the process of transitioning from the option. But I think he's got to be better than Valaire at this point. Valaire has just shown to be inaccurate. He's turnover prone. I mean, I just don't. I don't know what he kind of gives you at this stage, like that you have to keep running him out there. It's kind of the same thing as Vasco a little bit, where you're like, how many weeks do we have to see the exact same story play out before we kind of learn what the ending is? So, again, much like Coastal, I guess Georgia State's definitely in a different spot than Coastal, though. They don't have any aspirations of representing the East in the title game. So I think you do just take this season and try to figure out the quarterback spot and just keep throwing bodies at it and just seeing what you have, because whatever they're doing now is not working and it's not getting any better. So I think that's what you have to do is just keep plugging away and just hoping that somebody sticks, because Gibson looked good in his limited duty. I think you need to give him the start and probably the rest of the season, just because through 5 games, Valaire's just proven to not be it. So they need a spark on the offensive side of the ball that's not named Freddie Brock. Especially at the quarterback spot, because they're struggling to throw the ball consistently, and their defense isn't good either. So it's kind of one of those things. It's like you almost might as well transition to an air raid type of scheme, because you need to score points. Your defense can't get stops. The only reason this game was as close as it was is Old Dominion's not really all that talented on offense. So, if Joseph's not making things happen with his legs, they don't really have much else going for them. So, yeah, this is going to be a tough season for Georgia State. I mean, we kind of knew that coming in, but it's really fallen apart after upsetting Vanderbilt. It's really kind of all gone in the tank since then. But Old Dominion improves to 2-4 and is now 1-1 in conference play. Georgia State drops to 2-3 and is now 0-2 in the Sun Belt. Next one here, UL Monroe pulls away from Southern Miss late. We all saw this coming. I mean, I guess the surprising thing is it took until the fourth quarter for them to kind of put some real distance between them. But I'll say this, ULM is limited by what they can do at the quarterback spot. I guess this is a recurring theme for this episode, which is if these guys had decent to good quarterbacks, we would be talking about a lot of these teams and the offenses differently. But Arminta was good, but it's one of those things where the stats don't really show you how limited he is in the types of throws he can make. The receivers for ULM, frankly, aren't all that talented. So, again, they rely on defense, run the football, time of possession, being physical, and that's basically all they can do because, again, Arminta, I could go back to the JMU game a week ago. I mean, some of the throws he was missing, they weren't just like missing. They were like 10 feet over a receiver's head, and it was kind of ugly, some of the throws. So, again, great for them to win this game. Obviously, huge for them to be 5-1, 3-0 in the Sun Belt. But if something is going to put a cap on kind of this Cinderella season that they've had so far, it's, again, the quarterback spot, which is they have not really shown the ability to be able to throw the ball when they need to consistently. But they're 5-1.
Yeah, they're going to have to figure that out because one-dimensional teams never last. Granted, they're 5-1, which is incredibly impressive. But I mean, you can only ask Ahmad Hardy to do so much for so long before opposing teams are going to figure that out. And again, he had a really nice game, 121 yards on 15 carries, averaged 8 yards a carry, gets 2 touchdowns, had 53 yards receiving as well. A really complete performance from a freshman running back. But again, like I said, you start to people now have 6 games of tape on Ahmad Hardy. Somebody with a good defensive coordinator is going to say, that's all they do. Take him out of the equation, and they're done. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think their receivers are super talented, but Armenta is going to have to figure out a way to make them at least a little bit multidimensional if they want to continue the success down the backstretch of their schedule.
Well, you mentioned it. If a defensive coordinator, with 6 games of tape can figure out what they're, how to put it kind of into this offensively, that would be great. However, unfortunately for other teams, there aren't a lot of great defensive coordinators in the conference. So, and ULM probably has the best one when it's all said and done. There just frankly aren't that many good defenses in the conference as it is. So it's a lot of points. It's throwing the ball a ton, but it's not, hey, we're going to play, 10-3 football games. That's just not really the formula for winning in the conference. And it's also not a thing that we see very often, which kind of makes ULM what they're doing even more kind of spectacular, which is, again, these teams don't play defense a lot of the time. So you're in a track meet for 60 minutes, and ULM has just slowed games down, again, pounded the rock, kept Armenta from having to throw the ball too much because there have been some really ugly throws he's uncorked this year. So again, credit to Bryant Vincent and crew, but yeah, if anything puts a cap on this season, it's going to be what the quarterback spot looks like. But ULM 5-1, 3-0 in the Sun Belt. Southern Miss drops to 1-5 and is now 0-2 in the conference. Shame Zeke wasn't here for this one. He would have been, the cock of the walk to talk about Texas State absolutely drubbing Arkansas State 41-9. This was ugly for Jalen Rayner and the Red Wolves. Jordan McLeod was nearly perfect. He was 24 of 29 for 320 yards and 4 touchdowns. Basically, Arkansas State, I wouldn't say we thought that their defense turned a corner the way that they played against South Alabama, but there were sort of signs of encouragement. And this is just, we're back to square one. Like we demolished a building and we're back to the foundation of they just simply don't have a good defense. And there's not really a lot to do about that. So that's the thing is, there are levels to the conference where, you can play a South Alabama to a 18-16, rock fight one week. And then the next week you're going to be struggling to put up 10 points against, frankly, not a very good Texas State defense, all things considered, but the Arkansas State is just not on their level, and it really showed in this one.
Yeah, it was a complete performance from Texas State. I mean, they got everything rolling. Jordan McLeod was impressive. Ishmael Mahdi was great. The defense locked down a decent offense in Arkansas State. And, just kept their foot on the gas, which is something that I've questioned if Texas State was able to do. And they did it. But look, one thing to point out about Arkansas State is if you look at their 3 scoring drives that were all 3 field goals, one commonality that they have is that they were all 50 yards or more. So Arkansas State was moving the football and then just not punching it into the end zone, which is a problem, especially as they get late into the meat of their Sun Belt schedule in the Western Division. Dominant win by Texas State. one that I think they needed for confidence. And look, they've got a big test looming around the corner on October 29th. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Certainly. Yeah, Texas State, sometimes it's hard to get a grasp on them, but I think all in all, when everything's said and done, I mean, they're one of the 4 best teams in the conference. So they should be putting these types of beatings on lesser teams like the Arkansas States of the world, where, frankly, Jalen Raynor's been all over the map this year. And he's sort of been, would you say he's been disappointing? I think he has for, being reigning freshman of the year in the Sun Belt. Do you think he's kind of taken a step back a little bit, or do you think it's just the players around him aren't really helping him out?
I think it's probably both. Because I mean, you look at his numbers aren't horrible. I think it's just one of those things where, you look at the way that he's played, right? And we talked about Arkansas State, were they for real, or, was this just kind of a wait and see type of thing? The biggest thing with Jalen Raynor to me is that he's turned the ball over a ton. He already has 6 interceptions. That's an interception a game. He's been sacked 10 times, so his offensive line's not really protecting him. And then, like you said, he's not getting really much help anywhere else. Their leading rusher has 207 yards. Like they're averaging 3.1. They're averaging 3.1 yards per carry as a team. Like that's just not good enough.
Well, that's always kind of been their deal under Butch Jones, is like they just don't run the ball all that well. And I don't know if it's I don't know if that's by design with the way that the offense is set up. I don't know if the offensive line can't get a push up front to make that happen, or if they just don't have the horses at the running back spot to make it a reality. But that's kind of always been the deal, even going back to, what was it, Logan Bonner and those types of guys like a while back. They are forced to throw the football to no end. And, there are games where it looks great and, you don't have any questions. And then there's other times where it's like, hey, if we were able to even generate 4 yards a carry on the ground, like that would be a huge help. And they just can't.
Yeah.
They can't seem to make it happen. Plus, on the other side of things, it would help out the defense if they weren't, moving so quickly, whether it be on scores or 3 and outs. If you're able to run the ball and at least give your defense a little bit of a rest, a defense that frankly isn't very good, I think that would help them out as well and play complementary football a little bit. But this has kind of been the formula under Butch Jones, is like, I know he found Raynor last year and that was all great. But again, our questions coming into the season were, is the defense going to be any better? Was like A1, the question A1, like, because everything kind of hinged around that. Like, Rucker is a good receiver. You've got some other pieces. Jaquez Cross is sort of all over the place. Like sometimes he's good and sometimes you just don't know where he's like missing. Like he's on a milk carton.
Correct.
You have no idea where he went. So it's just one of those things where it's like, you can't be a totally one-dimensional offense and make things work. And we've seen that with the teams that have been great the last couple of years, with Troy and App and all those other teams that have, Louisiana, again, all the teams that have competed for conference titles, Coastal Carolina, like in the last couple of years, have been able to run the football and throw it. And we haven't really yet seen a team in a while that just are like, hey, we're just going to throw the ball 50 times a game and we're going to win the conference. Like, you really have to be stacked at the pass catcher spot and at offensive line and quarterback for that all to work out. And we just haven't seen it. So I'm not surprised it kind of hasn't panned out. But Texas State is now 4-2, good win for them, 2-0 in the conference. Their hopes of representing the West in the Sun Belt title game are still alive, even if their college football playoff hopes have been dead for a while. Arkansas State is 3-3 and now 1-1 in the conference. Getting into this next one here, Matt, I know you were covering LSU Ole Miss, which was a crazy game in itself on Saturday night. So I don't know if you went back and rewatched Louisiana and App. I have a couple of thoughts because I watched I want to say the first quarter and a half, and then when Georgia Southern went down 23-3 and we were throwing, and we'll get to that game in a minute, but when Georgia Southern was throwing swing passes on like 3rd and 8 down 20 points in the third quarter, I flipped it over to the Louisiana game for a bit just to see how things were going. Joey Aguilar was not good in this game. Like, I don't know what's happened to him. Like, I don't know if the Space Jam aliens have come down and made him touch a magic football that sucked all his talent out. But he threw 4 picks in this game. He threw 2 of them that were extremely ugly. One, he was rolling to the right and tried to, I don't know if he was trying to throw the ball out of bounds or he was trying to hit a guy right before he went out, but he threw it right to a defender. Don't really understand that. And then at the end of the game, when they were trying to drive to kind of make it a respectable, he hit a Louisiana defender right between the numbers with one. So you touched on it a little bit, and we've talked about it the last couple of weeks. I'm kind of surprised, frankly, that Sean Clark still has a job at this stage. Like, it's crazy to me when every Sunday/Monday passes and it's like he's still employed and he's giving quotes to the media about how they're going to figure things out. And I'm like, this kind of sounds like Doug Peterson with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it's just like, hey, we got to do something. And you're like, wow, that really inspires a ton of confidence.
Right. Look, I don't think that this was a truly pretty performance by either team.
Nope.
I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, well, the Cajuns' defense forced 5 turnovers, and that's great. That's what you want." But at the same time, App State, you didn't put the game away until a minute left against what we can agree is a pretty App State team. That's not comforting if you're a Cajuns fan. You jump out, you have a 17-7 lead with 2 minutes left in the second quarter. App State goes on a 70-yard drive in 90 seconds to make it a 3-point game going into the break. You trade field goals in the third quarter. Like, just not you never put it away. I said this to a colleague the other day, and I still stand by it. I look at this game with App, and I look at the game with Southern Miss, and I know that the game with Southern Miss was a little more dominant than what the final score indicated.
Mm-hmm.
However, I feel like the Cajuns are winning games because of what their opponent didn't do.
Yeah.
More than what they're doing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, so one of the things I had a question for you about, because again, I watched probably all in all, I would say 2.5 quarters of this one. I haven't watched a ton of Louisiana this year because typically they conflict with when Georgia Southern's playing, and I'm like, I know Matt's watching this game intently, so I don't need to double up on it. I don't know why the Louisiana defenders didn't want to tackle Kanye Roberts, but they did not seem like they wanted to meet him in the hole. And I don't really understand like what the problem was. I mean, it was like he would get the ball and he would come up, and then the Louisiana defenders almost seemed like they were like taking a step back, like when he would come through. And I was like, is this a normal thing that Louisiana does? Do they do this a lot? Because if so, that's a reason for concern right there.
So typically they're a pretty solid tackling team. The game against Tulane kind of exposed their tackling issues, right? And then it got cleaned up with Wake Forest a little bit. It got cleaned up against Southern Miss, and then it reared its head again against App on Saturday night. Look, Kanye Roberts is a great running back. He's one of those guys that he's gonna get his. So I'm not surprised that he went over the century mark. But no, I agree with you. There were some moments where I don't think that the Cajuns defense wanted anything to do with him. And that's a little bit concerning, especially since you're 2 weeks away from playing Jordan McLeod and Ishmael Mahdi. I don't love that. But look, all in all, this is a team for the Cajuns. App State is a team that you have struggled to beat in their time in the Sun Belt. I think you've beaten them 3 times in their time in the Sun Belt, and so anytime you can get a win over them, it is good, right? That's a confidence boost. But it wasn't a pretty win by any stretch. And again, I know, 5 turnovers. Again, great. I love to see that the defense got 5 turnovers. But the fact of the matter is, you got 5 turnovers and very easily could have lost the game.
Yeah.
That's my concern going forward.
Similarly, if you have any, what are your biggest concerns with the offensive side of the ball? It just seems like it's weird because it feels like Louisiana has, and I know I think I've touched on this. Maybe it was the beginning of this year, maybe it was the end of last year. It seems like Louisiana's biggest weakness throwing the football is that they don't have like a go-to guy. Like they have a collection of players that can all contribute. But when it comes time, you need to convert like a tough 3rd and 8. It's like, I don't know. Is it Legendre? Is it Carter? Is it, it's like, I don't really know. Like it can just be anybody on any given night. So
Correct.
Offensively, what concerns you sort of about what they've done, I guess, this year, and where could you potentially see like an issue?
There's no dude. Kind of like you just alluded to, right? A 3rd and 8. Who are you going to? Where's that? Hey, I'm gonna run a slant route across the middle, and I'm gonna get you the first down.
Yeah,
You don't have that. I think they wanted it to be Jake, and I think times last year it was Jacob Bernard, who's had a really good career. Right? He reminds me so much of Hunter Renfrow, of Julian Edelman. Just a tough kid that's going to make the catch. But for whatever reason, whether it's matchups or good play by defenses, he just hasn't been open a ton. And Harvey Broussard's kind of become like your go-to playmaker along with Lance Lejeune. But again, and even in the running back room with Braylon Washington and Zylan Perry and Bill Davis, who each had really good games on Saturday against App. There's no alpha, right? There's no main guy, and then 3 really good guys that can also get the ball. And I think the teams that have the most success in the Sun Belt have that guy. Because even a couple years ago, when the Cajuns had Trey Regis, Elijah Mitchell, and Raymond Kale, the first year that you had the 3, it was Trey Regis. Trey Regis was the dude, and then you had 2 really good backs under him. And then when Trey left and Raymond Kale left and the came in, it was Elijah Mitchell, Chris Smith, so on and so forth. You always had a dude. And I just don't see this team having that top guy right now.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. I mean, I've long kind of thought that's the only thing for me that kind of holds Louisiana back from, like you said, teams of years past with Louisiana just making that kind of jump and into sort of the next tier with like the truly great Sunbelt teams. So we'll see, if that's, sustainable, if they can, make that work. But some games it looks like, hey, no issues here, and then sometimes it's like, it's a process, like getting a drive sustained and stuff like that, because it becomes, like we said, you get a penalty, you get a holding call, now you're in 2nd and 15 or whatever it is, and now we have to really chip away at this. So we'll see how that all pans out, but we'll see if somebody kind of emerges, or if it just continues to be kind of wide receiver by committee. But with this, Louisiana is now 5-1 and is 2-0 in the Sun Belt. App State is now 2-4 and is 0-3 in the conference. Who would have thought that would have been happening before the season started? I don't think anybody. All right, last game of the night here. This one was insane. So Matt, let me kind of take you through what happened, right? Okay. So first off, we were at least I was waxing poetic last week about Braylon Braxton and what he's able to do for Marshall. Marshall, being Marshall and Charles Huff being who he is, decides, that was a really good game. Braylon Braxton, you start the game on the bench. Stone Earl gets to play. So Stone Earl starts this game. He leads them to 6 points in the first quarter. They can't really convert in the red zone. They keep stalling out. So they're settling for field goals. It's 6-3 after the first quarter. Braylon Braxton comes in, and 3 of the first 4 drives he was on, he generates 17 points, and then they yank him right back out of the game and put Stone Earl back in, who, again, generated, I think, 6 points the entire game. So you've got that. He's basically kind of wasting their time on offense. However, on the defensive side, they dominated Georgia Southern for the first 55 minutes of this game, to be quite frank. J.C. French was not good, despite what his stat line says. They seemed very reticent and scared to push the ball down the field. Like I said, they were down 20 at one point, and the reason I flipped it over to the Louisiana game was because it was 3rd and 8. They're down 20 points. They're throwing swing passes out of the backfield to their running back and getting tackled for 3 yards. And I'm like, that's fine if you're just not going to try to win the game. But I've got other games I can watch. There's Oregon and Ohio State's on another channel. LSU, Ole Miss is on one channel. Heck, there's better Sunbelt games on at the moment. So for a little bit, I flipped it over to another game because I was like, if you guys are just going to wave the white flag, that's fine. Whatever. So the fourth quarter starts, and J.C. French is scrambling, and he gets ear-holed because it was targeting, but they didn't throw the flag, nor did they review it for targeting. So he goes out with a concussion. They get a safety, and in the last 5 minutes, they scored 21 unanswered to win this game over Marshall, which is one of the most insane win probability charts you will ever see. I'm pretty sure Marshall hit a 99.9% on it, and then there's just a straight line down, like when Enron was on the stock market. That's what it looks like. So, yeah, Dexter Williams comes in. He leads Georgia Southern to 16 points because they were down 23-5. 18 points. They were down 23-5. It was just insane. Again, Braylon Braxton had, I think, 2 fumbles. But here's my question for you, Matt. This is my litmus test. If you had a guy, your team has 23 points on the board. The guy you've put in has 2 fumbles, but he has 17 of the 23 points generated. And the other guy has not turned the ball over, but he only has 6 points in his 7 drives that he's had. Who would you rather have in at that point?
The guy that's generated 17 points.
Correct. So I don't think Charles Huff wants this job. I don't think he wants to keep this job.
He might not. He very well might not. Because things have just gone downhill in Huntington. His first year, they go to the New Orleans Bowl, and then they come into the Sun Belt, and things just kind of are all over the place. So, yeah, I mean, you could be very accurate. After a year or two, he's maybe like, I kind of miss Alabama. Maybe Kalen DeBoer needs a defensive line film watcher. I don't know. God,
Herbie Smarts needs an analyst in that room.
Right, that guy might make more than Charles Huff does at Marshall, to be completely honest. God, God, what a nice life to be an analyst at a elite program like Alabama or Georgia. I
For
mean,
sure.
200K, do this much work, like, come on.
Yeah.
Get a national championship ring. Like, okay, where do I sign? But
Right.
anyways, yeah, look, just poor decision making. Look, I know Braylon Braxton had 2 turnovers, and you don't want that, but at the same time, if he's the one that is scoring the football, keep him in the game.
Right.
I mean, look at Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier threw 3.5 quarters Saturday night. He admittedly said it post game. It was the worst game of his career.
Mm-hmm.
He was bad. But LSU never went away from him. He kept pushing. His receivers continued to trust in him. And what happened? He threw a 4th and 5 touchdown pass with 30 seconds left, which go back and watch that play on the all 22 look. Where the hell does Aaron Anderson come from? I don't know. That was a master class. And then the throw to Kyron Lynch in overtime to win it, which, by the way, not tooting my own horn. I was in the end zone when that happened. I have a great video of the touchdown and the ensuing celebration. Absolutely awesome. But no, getting back to the Sunbelt point here. It's the perfect idea of it's not over till it's over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Marshall has Georgia Southern dead to rights, and Georgia Southern just kept chipping away. They benefited from some poor coaching decisions by Charles Huff, and Marshall, slapped in the face in the end, and Georgia Southern gets out with a win and says thank you very much on their way back to Statesboro.
Well, okay, so there's a lot of things, and normally in this type of case, you would say Clay Helton outcoached Charles Huff. No, Charles Huff outcoached Charles Huff, but it was like
right.
It was like bad Charles Huff outcoached himself because, okay, again, the Braxton point, we don't need to belabor that. But the other thing too is AJ Turner. I don't know if for some reason, he is the break glass in case of I need a big play emergency. But he was getting whatever he wanted on the ground. When he and Braxton were in the backfield and they were like running read option, Georgia Southern couldn't figure out what to do. Like AJ Turner finished with 14 carries for 97 yards. Like common sense would say, hey, maybe we need to give this guy more volume. And they just are like, nope, we have Ethan Payne for that. So I'm just like, I don't know what to make of this because any normal team would say, hey, we found something that's working. Let's keep doing that. And Charles Huff's like, nope, don't want to do that anymore. So again, the last thing too, Dexter Williams came in place of French, who Helton reiterated, I think, in a press conference earlier this week, or maybe it was yesterday, Monday. He was like, JC French is our quarterback. That's all fine and well and good. But if he's like not making it through the concussion protocol and he got hit pretty solid, I'm not really all that upset if Dexter Williams has to play against JMU on Saturday.
Correct.
So, and he threw a ball, Derwin Burgess, to win the game, caught this ball amazingly, totally covered up, one hand just extended out in the end zone, caught it as he was going to the ground and just like brought it to his body. And then I think, again, it was Stone Earl came out on the following possession. They're down 1 point. They just need to get into field goal range. He immediately throws an interception to Mark Stampley, and that's the end of the game. So, yeah, this was an all-time disaster class from Charles Huff and the Marshall football team. And obviously people on social media are not happy about it, as people on social media typically aren't happy in general. But I totally see their point. You can't blow a 21-point lead with 6 minutes to go. Like, correct. It's something that can't happen. And they took their better quarterback out. They took their foot off the gas and got really conservative with their play calling in multiple spots where you could probably have uncorked one pass or put Braxton back in and let Nib scramble, and he would have gotten 20
Certainly.
yards and put you in field goal position. But they just didn't do that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sort of hesitant to give credit to Georgia Southern because I feel like Marshall did everything in their power to shoot themselves in the foot, and being down 20 points in the fourth quarter and coming back is not something that's sustainable, especially this weekend with who they have to play. But this was a good win for them. Clay Helton needed this. I think there was a stat. He was 0-3, I think, coming off of buys in his coaching career at Georgia Southern, which how does that happen? You have an entire week to prep for your next game, and you guys are just like slacking off, I guess, in the off time. But yeah, he really needed this because they need to have a season where they can at least sell to the fans, hey, we were in contention for a bit in the East, and we didn't totally dissolve like we did in 2023. So again, good win for them. Georgia Southern is now 4-2 this season, 2-0 in the conference. Marshall drops to 3-3 and is now 1-1 in the Sun Belt. So let's transition over to week 8. We can make picks on this. We can sort of just so we're recording on Tuesday, the 15th. We can kind of just say that the Troy South Alabama thing's a wash because it's ongoing right now. But also, South Alabama currently leads 19-0 over Troy, and it's about to be half. So, again, the Troy reparation season for being good the last couple of years rolls on, where they're gonna be lucky to win another game with sort of the performances they're turning in this season. So that's already out the window because again, I wrote my picks down in our spreadsheet ahead of time, but I mean I can wipe it off too. It's fine. Let's talk about Thursday. Tonight, the night people are hearing this. Georgia State is traveling to Marshall to Joan Edwards Stadium. The Joan. Marshall is a 9-point home favorite. Over-unders 51.5. I'm taking Marshall because if Charles Huff, A, doesn't win this game, and B, doesn't hand, frankly, a bad Georgia State team their own backside, he's going to be out of a job come Saturday morning. So I think this is something that needs to happen. You cannot lose to both Georgia Southern and Georgia State in back-to-back weeks, especially the way that last week went.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to take Marshall here. They're at home, and I think that they're going to bounce back after a tough loss. Rely on A.J. Turner, let Braylon Braxton play, and just win the damn game.
Stop being cute. Stop trying to put inferior players in. I don't know if you made you couldn't have made a deal with Stone Earl before the season even because Griffiths, the guy that walked away from the sport of football, was the supposed starter. So this isn't even a situation of like, Florida State with DJU where they're like, well, I don't know, we promised him he would play. It's like, you didn't promise Stone Earl anything as far as I know. So it's weird that you keep letting an inferior quarterback play in games where you absolutely need to win. So, yeah, if they're smart, let A.J. Turner get the bulk of the carries. Let Braylon Braxton take the bulk of the snaps from the shotgun. And just stop making it harder on yourself than it needs to be. All right.
Yep.
Noon, Louisiana on ESPNU. Louisiana is traveling to Conway to take on Coastal Carolina. Louisiana is a 4.5-point road favorite. Over-unders 56.5. I don't feel great about it because you guys typically play down to competition, but I will take Louisiana minus 4.5. I just Coastal Carolina's quarterback situation is just a mess. And they don't have the running game that say like App State does with Kanye Roberts, where you guys defenders are not going to want to tackle somebody. So I'm going to take Louisiana and just kind of cross my fingers and hope that you guys have finally like a get right game. I know you're 5-1, but you kind of need to get a full, like you said, a full game offense and
complementary football.
Yeah,
you got to play complementary football. I'm going to take the Cajuns as well on the fact that if you look at Coastal's schedule and results, they have given up 20 or more points to every opponent that they've played. And that includes William and Mary, by the way. So look, I think the Cajuns will be able to score on this defense. And I think that the Cajuns defense will be able to make plays, especially if Ethan Vasco continues to stay on the downside of his season-long plateau. I'll take the Cajuns minus 4.5.
All right. 3:30 ESPN Plus. Texas State is traveling to Old Dominion to take on the Monarchs. Texas State is a 10-point road favorite. Over under 61.5. I'm pretty sure I did this last week. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to take the under of 61.5. I think Texas State probably runs away with this one, but I just don't see how Old Dominion's going to be able to score enough to stay anywhere near that total. So
I'm gonna take the under as well. But look, here's the thing: Texas State has proven, they have this really great complete game, and now they're gonna skid a little bit. And look, Old Dominion's one of those sneaky teams you just never know. They're at home. They got a close win last week that maybe gives them a little bit of confidence. I don't think Old Dominion wins, but man, I think that they can make things really interesting.
But I think, and this is sort of supporting both of our picks, but I think in order to make that happen, this game has to be like 31-27. Like, I don't think you can, or like 27-21. Like, I don't think you can get, I don't think Old Dominion has the guys, quite frankly. I mean, like, Colton Joseph, that's all well and fine. Like, I'm glad he scramble and gives them another dimension. Elsewhere, I just don't see where they have the horses to put up, an implied 20-21 or something. So like, I don't really
I agree with that, but at the same time, I took the under because I don't think Texas State's going to be able to replicate the type of offensive performance that they had against Arkansas State. So yeah, I mean, I could see a 31-17, 31-24 type game. It's going to go one or two ways. Old Dominion's going to keep it close, or Texas State's going to absolutely run away with it.
Yeah. 4:00 ESPN Plus. James Madison is traveling to Statesboro. Georgia Southern James Madison is a 9.5-point road favorite. Over unders 58.5. I'm going to take the under. I don't know. This is typically the type of game where if Georgia Southern has like a really, spirited comeback against Marshall, this is typically the game where they get steamrolled, but I don't know who's starting at quarterback for one, because JC French is dealing with a concussion. So I don't know which quarterback we're getting. I don't know if they're going to come out flat or if they're going to play like they care again because they didn't have a bye week to just, nap or whatever the hell Georgia Southern does on bye weeks. So take a fistful of Ambien like the Thursday before the game and just have a sleep in. Like, I don't know what it is they do during bye weeks. Like, it seems like they just play like video games and then it's like Friday and they're like, oh shoot, we got to get ready for a game tomorrow. So I'm going to take the under of 58.5. I think it goes one of two ways. Either Georgia Southern has to contain James Madison's offense, or James Madison beats them like they just beat Coastal Carolina and it's like 31-10 or 38-10. But I just don't see a way that both of these teams are going to play a shootout game with the kind of the state of Georgia Southern's offense.
So I was going to take Georgia Southern until you told me that JC French might not play. I knew he got banged up, but I wasn't sure where his injury outlook was. Without JC French, I think I have to take James Madison here.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. I don't knock anybody for doing that just because there's so much uncertainty at this point, and frankly, like Georgia Southern, Ryan Applin, the offensive coordinator at Georgia Southern, he will just have entire quarters that are just stinkers, like calling
Yep.
plays. Like it'll be a whole quarter where you're just like, well, that sucked at the end of it, and you're just like, well, against a better team than Marshall, we would be down 40 at this point instead of 21. So, yeah. Anyway, last game of the night, Arkansas State is traveling to Hattiesburg to take on a 1-5 Southern Miss team. 7:00 ESPN Plus. Arkansas State is a 7-point road favorite. Over unders 55.5. I'm taking Arkansas State -7. It just continues. Southern Miss just frankly isn't very good. I don't think they can put up points on a regular basis. I think if Jalen Rayner is finally going to get back into the positive touchdown to interception ratio, this would be the week to do it, because right now he's looking at 4 touchdowns and 6 picks on the season. I think Corey Rucker's going to have a big game. So yeah, give me Arkansas State.
Same. They need a bounce back performance, and I think they get it against a really bad Southern Miss team that is just waiting for the right opportunity to fire the ball.
Again, we're talking about it. I'm kind of surprised it didn't happen at their last bye week. I don't know what the AD could possibly see that he feels like they could do.
Right.
But we talked about it last week. It's honestly like, unlike App, where you're like hoping to get a bump from an intern coming in and like firing guys up and motivating them, like Southern Miss just frankly isn't good enough for that to even happen. So I guess they're just like, we'll just ride it out and then quietly put out a press release at the end of the season and say, hey, he won't be returning.
He's gone.
Yeah, he's got to be. There's no, he can't survive a 2-10, 1-11 season after the season they had last year and look their fans in the face and ask for donations. Donate to the athletic department. All right, so that is week 8 coming up. Matt, do you want to let everybody know where they can find you on socials? And then I will do the same and we'll get out of here.
Yeah, you can media at Miguez Matt. Looking forward to another great weekend of college football. Texas and Georgia play each other. Another great weekend of Sun Belt football as well. Cajuns are in Conway, and that's always a fun one.
Yeah, you can find me on X at Watch the Stone. Again, check out all of our Warm Weather Fans social media outlets, our YouTube account as well. We're trying to grow all of these things. If you want one solid link that takes you to all of these things that we talk about, in our bio on X, there's a link tree that has all of our outlets. You can click on any of that stuff, take a look at it. We will be back next week. Hopefully Zeke is better and feels better and good enough to join us. Thanks for everybody. This has been another episode of Warm Weather Fans, the Sunbelt Podcast.